So, welcome to another week of BodyWise Talks. I am Susana, and I am a licensed mental health counselor and board certified dance movement therapist. And the purpose of these talks is to meet every week in order to really hone in on how do we become more in tune with our bodies? How do we become more embodied? Hi, welcome in, Vane. So that we can live a better life, so that we can learn to cope. And I am the founder of BodyWise Psychotherapy, where we go beyond traditional talk therapy to provide an embodied approach to counseling. And so today's topic is riding the wave of anxiety. And we're going to be talking about what anxiety is, how it shows up in the body, and how to ride that wave. In other words, meet that energy where it's at and then learn to kind of regulate it, so that we can learn to manage any symptoms. So if anybody here struggles with anxiety, leave a comment, let us know. Or you can just engage by liking the video, sharing. And I think it's a pretty common experience. I think most people probably have experienced anxiety at one time or another in their life, if not consistently throughout. So I think it's a pretty helpful topic in general. We're also going to end today with a few embodied practices that you can practice with me watching this video and throughout the week if you like. So if you're watching this later on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. Welcome in. Hi, Natos. Yeah, so your anxiety attacks started in 2020. Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about the difference between generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder. There is a slight difference, but at the root of it, we're dealing with different manifestations of anxiety. Okay, so before we dive in, say hello in the comments. Let me know where you're from. You can also share this live out and like and all of that. Yes. Okay. So let's begin by talking about what anxiety is, right? And um, and feeling into that a bit, actually. So whatever you're doing right now, take a moment, pause, and take a few breaths. Inhaling breath in this moment. And then bring your awareness to just any sensations that might be up for you right now in this moment in your body. So that could be temperature, that could be tension, that can be relaxation. Greetings. And then also noticing any thoughts, any thoughts that are up for you right now. Maybe you have something on your mind. Maybe you're thinking about what to do next. Hello, welcome in, Rachel. Yes, we're just getting started, so welcome. Okay, so we paid attention to our breath, we paid attention to sensations in the body, and also our thoughts. Thank you for the likes. Yes. So, starting with what is anxiety, right? I think technically speaking, it is a mental illness, a disorder that we can find in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. And typically whenever we're assessing for anxiety, most of the things that we look for, most of the criteria are body based. Okay, we're looking at a racing heartbeat, shortness of breath, we're looking at appetite, we're looking at sleep, we're looking at let's see what else, sweaty palms. All of these symptoms can actually be found in the assessment, right? That are one of the main assessments that we take in order to figure out, is this anxiety that I'm experiencing, right? So it's interesting to note that the way that we define or experience anxiety is mostly body based. Okay, it's based on symptoms that we feel in our body. So that in itself gives us the key, right? So if we're experiencing all of these things in our body, then that's a wonderful way of treating these symptoms as well. Okay, so so to get more specific, one of the major things that we can look at is the breath. The beautiful thing about the breath is that, it's both automatic and it's also, we can do it consciously. We can just not think about our breath no matter what. Our body's going to take care of it. We're going to breathe. We're going to get the oxygen we need for the most part. Or we can also consciously practice breath work and be conscious about the way that we're inhaling and exhaling. And there are so many different forms of breath work, so many different practices that we can do. But essentially, we can also monitor our breath. We can observe our breath. Okay. And that in itself provides a signal as to what we're feeling. Right. So we could go to the doctor and get our cortisol levels measured, which is a wonderful way of noting, again, an embodied way of noting when our stress levels are high. Right. And we know based on neuroscience that when our cortisol levels are high, that's also associated to being in a fight or flight part of our nervous system. Right. So the sympathetic part of our nervous system. So we have the sympathetic, which is we're alert, where there's an alertness, there's an awakeness, right? And then when we take that part of our nervous system into overdrive, we get burnt out, we get overwhelmed, we get into fight or flight, right? And then we have the parasympathetic part of our nervous system, which is about relaxing, which is what helps us sleep. So when that part is in overdrive, we shut down and we oversleep, right? Perhaps there can be a correlation there with depression even, right? Which is next week's topic, by the way. So we could go and measure that, but one simple way of noting is just basically by paying attention to our bodies, by being body wise, body aware. Okay, so that body awareness is always key. It's always key in finding out what's going on with us in every moment. And also, once we're aware of what might be going on with us, then we can find a solution. Then we can find different ways of coping. Okay. So the breath is definitely one. And I want to take a moment to pause and read the comments here. Rachel Garcia is saying, yes, when I know it's coming, I have to hold my own hands or have someone hold my hands. Makes me feel a little bit better. And, as you're saying that, I'm actually doing this, right? As I'm talking, I'm doing this. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. And the breath 100% works. Yes. So holding your hand, that's a wonderful, 1 second here. I think I'm back. There we go. That's a wonderful coping strategy, Rachel. Thank you for sharing that. So definitely that touch, that sensation, and we'll get into self-soothing a bit later. But yes, definitely that could be a wonderful way of just grounding and feeling into the body and being present right here and now. So I'm wonderful for sharing that. So the breath is definitely one way of assessing and also treating anxiety. Then we look at sensations. So sensations in the body, like I mentioned before, sweaty palms, racing heartbeat, things like that, that help us determine, okay, I'm anxious right now, right? Sometimes there can be a tightness in the chest. Sometimes there could be like a nervousness in the belly. So we all experience anxiety different ways, but there are these general ways that we can kind of pinpoint that for the most part, most people experience when they experience anxiety, which in itself is so interesting, right? So sensations in the body help us assess, is this anxiety? But it also can help us, again, ground into the present moment and help us relieve some of that intensity. Okay, so we'll talk about sensations and self-soothing in just a minute. The other thing is just knowing yourself, right? Knowing your body and knowing um, uh, what that experience is for you. And that's why I'm such an advocate of body awareness and paying attention to what's going on in every moment, because that really it's empowering. When we know what's going on, we have then the power to do something. And I just mentioned this quote to Nathaniel yesterday, and I said sometimes the biggest problem is not knowing what the problem is, right? So welcome in, welcome in. So when we have an idea of what is going on for us, that gives us a choice. That gives us more possibility to really find solutions, right? And find ways of coping. So let's transition into the next point here today, which is how do we cope, right? How do we cope with anxiety? And so we're going to focus today on embodied ways of coping. But of course, there's the mental aspect, right? The cognitive aspect of anxiety, which is your thoughts and the type of thoughts that we often have, right? So fear-based thoughts, worry, the dreaded what if, right? And oftentimes with anxiety, the what if is usually the worst case scenario, right? We think of all the wonderful, horrible ways that things can go wrong. And isn't that just such a testament to how powerful the mind is, right? Now, one thing on that note, one thing that I often, one strategy that we can often use with that is if all of those what ifs on the ways that things can go wrong come so easy to the mind, right? We can think of all the ways that things can go wrong like this, right? Then that means that the challenge is thinking about all the ways in which things can go right. So what are the positive what ifs, right? So that's one way of working with the mind. When you feel that you're thinking about, oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if that happens? And before you know it, there's a tightness in your chest and you can't breathe and really can't think of any solutions. Then, first of all, practice some of these embodied practices that we're going to go through in just a minute. And then come back and think, okay, what if it goes right? What if an opportunity presents itself? What if I do this instead? Right? And then we can open up to solutions and other ways of seeing how things might manifest for us. Okay. So I'm gonna pause here. Welcome Alexis Moten. Welcome in. Rachel saying counting also helps calm yourself down. Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about a few embodied coping strategies, starting with the breath and counting. So sometimes all we need is a little bit of a distraction for the mind, right? So counting can keep your mind occupied as you practice a breath exercise, right? So one of them is called square breathing, where you imagine a square. So that's perfect because I have a square behind me, right? So the square has 4 sides, right? So you inhale on one side, exhale, inhale, and exhale. And we're going to keep the counting even throughout. So let's just say 4 counts, just for the sake of practicing. So go ahead and practice with me. Okay, so we're going to inhale for 4. Exhale for 4. Inhale for 4. And exhale for 4. Okay, so that's paced breathing. We're going to just Keep the inhale and the exhale even as we go. Another way of doing square breathing, which may or may not work for you, is to inhale for 4, hold your breath for 4, exhale for 4, hold the breath out for 4, and then repeat. Okay, so what are we doing there? Okay, we're keeping the mind occupied with counting. We're very consciously manipulating our breath, our exhale and our inhale. And we're also slowing down, which is key here, especially with anxiety. When it comes to anxiety, it's about slowing down the heart rate, the breathing, okay? And that in itself is shown to reduce your cortisol levels and basically relax your nervous system. Okay. Another breathing exercise is the calming breath, which the rule of thumb here is just that the exhale is longer than the inhale. A longer exhale. That's all you need. So let's try that out. We're going to inhale for 4 and then exhale for 6 counts. Okay, so try it out with me. And this time we're going to practice it a little bit differently. We're going to inhale through the nose and then exhale through the mouth and just see what that feels like for you. Okay, so inhaling all together for 4 and exhaling for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and trying that on your own. And the beautiful thing about these practices is that you can do it anytime. You can do it while you're breathing. While you're, you can breathe while you breathe. You can do it while you're driving. You can do it while you're eating. You can do it while you're at work, while you're listening to a live, whatever the case may be, right? The breath is always with you. And that's the beauty of the body. Rachel is saying the brain can be your worst enemy sometimes, but we have more control than we think. Yes. This takes a lot of energy and discipline, but definitely works. Absolutely. It takes discipline. And I would say it takes consistency, right? I think the more that you practice, the better that you get at it, the easier that it flows. And, I think that it's not necessarily about this um, this mentality around how do we cure anxiety. We don't use that terminology in psychotherapy, but instead it's about how we cope. So it may be that you might always experience some degree of anxiety if that's something that you're prone to, but you'll get better at managing it. You'll get better at dealing with it, and that's all about just living a life that's worth living. Okay. So another interesting point to note here with anxiety is that oftentimes anxiety, it's actually a lot of energy. The way that I conceptualize anxiety is that it's actually a lot of energy coursing through your body. Okay. And what happens is that sometimes when we go into freeze, what we're doing is that we're holding all of that energy in. And you might feel a tension in your muscles. You might feel that you're literally holding your breath. You might feel very still. So it's different for everyone, but that might be the case if you're in flight, in a flight state, okay, in your nervous system. So a lot of times movement is about just releasing that tension in the muscles, in the shoulders, releasing that tension, shaking it off. And we know that shaking is this primal rhythm, this primal movement that we all can tune into and engage in our bodies, that is naturally there to help us release and reset our nervous system. If you watch any animal, especially dogs, you can see that they shake, right? After they've been barking and they've been in an alert state, they then shake it off, and you can see that they they relax. You can see that it immediately has an effect on their state. We can do the same thing. It's about bringing that movement into the body. Okay. The other thing is that sometimes anxiety can manifest by a restlessness and a lot of activity and overactivity in our minds and in our movements even, right? So in those cases, again, we meet that energy where it's at, meeting that energy. So it's not about necessarily all the time being about calming down, but it's about gearing up. Sometimes treating anxiety is about gearing up. Okay. It's about if we feel anxious, rather than trying to sit down and meditate, which can actually be very challenging, if you're in that heightened state, then it's maybe about going for a walk or a run or putting some music on and moving the body or cleaning. I know that oftentimes if I feel anxious, I just start to clean. I start to channel that energy that I'm feeling into something else, something that happens to be productive, although it doesn't have to be, right? I think I can go off on a tangent on that. We live in a society where we're always, productivity is always, glorified, but it's not always about that, right? So anyway, so meeting that energy where it's at is very important. Hi, Myra, welcome in. So coping with anxiety is not always about relaxation. Oftentimes, it could be about meeting that energy first and then relaxing, practicing some kind of relaxation practice. So we're gonna get into the embodied practice in just a minute. So we'll practice what I'm about to explain here, but a lot of times that's why the name of this live is called Riding the Wave. It's called Riding the Wave because it is about maybe meeting that heightened peak of energy and then bringing that intensity down. Okay. So, first step one is being aware. What am I feeling in my body? What is my breath doing? What are the sensations in my body doing? Step two could be assessing. Okay. Can I practice a relaxation technique right now? Or am I too amped up? Am I too geared up? Okay. If you're too geared up, then meet that energy where it's at first with some kind of movement or active practice. Okay. And then the final step is then after the activity, we then practice a relaxation, some kind of relaxation technique. Okay. And then we repeat. Right? If that still hasn't brought the level of intensity down, of anxiety low enough for you, then you just repeat the process again. And it is about that consistency, Rachel. Yeah. Okay, so let's transition now into a bit of a coping embodied practice for coping with anxiety. And I'm going to actually invite all of you to stand up if that feels right for you. And we're going to practice a little bit of meeting that energy where it's at, like I said earlier, right? So starting with the feet planted on the ground, making sure that you feel that stable connection between you and the ground and the earth. Yes. And having a slight bend in the knees to protect the knees. Yeah. And just shifting the weight from side to side, maybe just to press into that if that feels okay. And we're just going to begin to shake. Okay. So this is a simple way of doing it that you can do at any time. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 4 shakes, okay, on all the limbs. So the arms and the legs, okay? So starting with the right arm, we're going to shake 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Left arm, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right leg, 1, 2, 3, 4. Left leg, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to bring it to 3. So now we move it down to 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Legs. 1, 2, 3. Other leg. 1, 2, 3. Bring it down to 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2, and 1. 1, 1, 1, 1. And to finish, we're just going to shake the whole body, including the core of the body. Just shake, 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 shake. And then just let your body move however it wants. And as you shake, keep shaking. See if there's any particular part of the body that needs to shake more. Are there certain parts of the body where you are holding a little bit more tension? And then start to slow down the movements. Maybe rolling the shoulders back and doing a little bit of a slower, more fluid movement. So we're transitioning from shaking to flowing. And as we do this, notice your breath. Notice your heart rate. And in your own time, find stillness. Good. And coming back to a seated position. Yes, and we're going to practice a little bit of that calming breath to finish here. So inhaling deeply through the nose for 4 counts. So knowing that you can practice this embodiment, practice any time that you feel somewhat nervous or anxiety creeping up, you can shake it out. Shake it out, and then bring yourself to a stillness and a calming breath. Okay? Okay. Any other thoughts or comments or questions before we finish today? I know Vanessa mentioned panic attacks, and I wanted to kind of touch on that. So the distinction in criteria between generalized anxiety and panic attacks is simply that with generalized anxiety, you may not ever experience a panic attack, okay? And a panic attack is just a heightened state of anxiety in which oftentimes there's also additional symptoms like tunnel vision or just this sense of often people feel like they're gonna die. They believe and they feel like something is seriously wrong, right, with them, which is terrifying, right? And also along with panic disorder is just the fear that you might have a panic attack at any point. So just that anticipatory anxiety of maybe having a panic attack, that in itself is part of panic disorder, which is there's a distinction there between that and anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, right? Which is a pretty big distinction. Just that consistent worry of like, what if I have a panic attack, right? And so again, the way that you work with that is simply empowering yourself to be able to cope with anxiety, and specific techniques for panic attacks exist as well. I can do a live on that. And then also just working with the mind, and the way that we perceive the attacks themselves, right? And how do we stay present in the moment, that mindfulness, okay? Any other? Let's see. Rachel's saying, oh, yes, those are bad. The only thing I can share that helps me is telling myself that this too shall pass. Yes. And it is just a moment. A bad moment, but just a moment. Yes, Rachel. Very good. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. Thank you all so much for being here. I did want to announce that I will be launching a new coaching business called Rewild Coaching next month. Look out for that. I'll be launching the website and all the social media and all of that. But in the meantime, you can follow my Instagram, Rewild Coaching. And I'd be happy to have you there. And yeah, thank you all so much. I appreciate it. And I'll be back next Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We're going to be talking about depression, okay? An embodied approach to depression. So I'll see you all there. Mwah. Have a lovely day. Take care of yourselves. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Rachel. Bye, guys. See you next time.